Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we're uncovering the superhero origin story of Earth's ultimate survivor. Forget comic books for a second. The absolute most indestructible creature in the known universe is totally real, it's microscopic, and honestly, it might be living right outside your window in a patch of damp moss.
To really appreciate our subject today, I want you to picture this. It's the year 2019. The Israeli Bereshit spacecraft is hurtling toward the moon. Something goes catastrophically wrong, and it violently crash lands into the lunar surface. But amidst all that wreckage, a passenger actually survives the impact. So what microscopic Earthling could possibly withstand a crash landing in the literal vacuum of space? The answer, amazingly, is the tardigrade. This tiny animal, roughly half a millimeter long, was quite literally a passenger on that ill-fated spacecraft. And as we're going to see throughout this explainer, a lunar crash is, well, kind of just another day at the office for this unbelievable little creature.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our fascination with tardigrades actually goes back a really long time, over 250 years. German zoologist Johann August Ephraim Goes first described them way back in 1773. He affectionately called them little water bears because of their chubby, segmented bodies and their 8 legs ending in these tiny little claws. A few years later, they got the official name tardigrada, which literally means slow steppers, thanks to their sluggish, almost clumsy insect-like walk.
Now, what's really interesting is the physical diversity of these little bears. Before we get into their superpowers, it helps to quickly understand their biology. The phylum Tardigrada is divided into 2 main classes, Eutardigrada and Heterotardigrada. Eutardigrades are typically what we call make it. That just means they have a smooth, unarmored outer layer and paired double claws. Heterotardigrades, on the other hand, they're basically tiny tanks. They're flattened out, covered in heavy armor plates, and have complex sensory appendages. But you know, regardless of the class, it's what they can survive that truly boggles the mind.
Just listen to these unbelievable extremes. Tardigrades have been subjected to temperatures of 0.05 Kelvin, that is functional absolute zero. They've been heated to a scorching 150 degrees Celsius, which is way above the boiling point of water. They withstand 600 megapascals of crushing pressure. They literally survive shock impacts of over 1 gigapascal from high-speed lab guns. And they endure ionizing radiation at an insane 6,000 gray. To put that into perspective, that's roughly 1,000 times the lethal dose for a human being. Oh, and during the 2007 Photon M3 space mission, they became the first known animals to survive the hard, irradiated vacuum of outer space. Absolutely wild.
And this brilliantly illustrates the central paradox of the water bear. In their normal active state, they are purely aquatic and, surprisingly, pretty fragile. They need a thin film of water around their bodies just to breathe and metabolize. Without it, or if you just expose them to a standard cup of hot tea, they die. Their active lifespan is literally just a few months. But when they are threatened, they enter what's called the tune state. They shrink down, drop their body water to just 1%, and become practically invincible, surviving for decades in that state.
This brings us to a really vital concept, cryptobiosis. This is the ultimate secret to their survival. You see, tardigrades aren't technically extremophiles. They don't actively thrive or grow in the vacuum of space or inside a boiling pot. Instead, they survive by completely hitting the pause button on life. They suspend their metabolism to less than 0.01% of normal. So they aren't actually living through the extremes. They are just waiting them out in a state that is practically indistinguishable from death.
So, how do they actually pull this off physically? Well, it requires a massive transformation called cystogenesis, which is their path to dormancy. First, the tardigrade stops feeding and just goes totally quiet. Then, it physically retracts its 8 limbs right up into its body. It contracts into this tight spherical ball, reducing its surface area as much as possible, and secretes multiple layers of protective cuticles. Finally, it squeezes out its internal water to form a highly resilient cyst or ton. But honestly, the real magic here happens entirely on the molecular level. The Secret Lab, decoding intrinsically disordered proteins.
Okay, so we know what tardigrades do. But we need to step into the secret lab of their cellular biology to understand exactly how they do it. The answer lies in something completely unique. Most creatures that survive drying out, like certain nematodes or resurrection plants, they do it by pumping their cells full of specific sugars, like trehalose. Tardigrades? They don't do that. Instead, they manufacture what we call intrinsically disordered proteins, or IDPs. These are bizarre shape-shifting proteins. Under normal wet conditions, they're just floppy and totally lack a rigid 3D structure. But under extreme stress, they suddenly spring into action. The first major class of these proteins are called CAHS proteins. Think of them like molecular cotton candy. When a tardigrade starts drying out, these proteins begin to concentrate and completely change their form in a really incredible way.
Let's move to and see how this builds. First, when floating freely in water, these Cas monomers act as flexible spacers, just bumping around to keep cell parts from clumping together. But as the cell dries up, they self-assemble into these long structural filaments. Then, those filaments cross-link, creating a dense, 3D hydrogel that fills the entire cell. Finally, as the very last bit of water disappears, this gel vitrifies, meaning it literally turns into a solid bioglass. This glass matrix locks all the delicate cellular machinery, the proteins, the membranes, safely in place, completely freezing biochemical degradation until water returns. It's like freezing time.
But hey, stopping metabolism is only half the battle. What about radiation? Radiation literally shatters DNA. To survive that, tardigrades use a second, entirely unique biological weapon, DSUP, which is short for the damage suppressor protein.
Here's exactly how this incredible shield works. DSUP localizes right inside the cell nucleus. Its highly basic tail binds powerfully to the negatively charged DNA backbone. Crucially, it coats the nucleosomes, forming what researchers describe as a fuzzy physical complex around the chromatin. This fuzzy shield acts as a literal physical barrier. When ionizing radiation hits the cell and generates these super destructive hydroxyl radicals, the DSUP shield just takes the hit, dramatically reducing double-strand breaks in the tardigrade's genome. It's a built-in force field.
The crisis, the #TardyDate controversy.
With biological tools this bizarre, it's honestly no wonder they sparked one of the biggest scientific controversies in recent evolutionary genomics. Back in 2015, when scientists first sequenced the tardigrade genome, they published a shocking number, 17.5%. They claimed that nearly 1/6 of the tardigrade's entire genome was basically stolen from foreign bacteria, archaea, fungi, and plants through horizontal gene transfer. The working theory was that as the tardigrade dried out, its cell membranes fractured, allowing alien environmental DNA to seep in and just get stitched directly into its genetic code.
So, the crucial point is that 17.5% was completely wrong. Independent researchers very quickly debunked it. Because tardigrades are so incredibly tiny, they had to be pooled together for sequencing in that original study, bringing all their gut bacteria and environmental microbes right along with them. The researchers simply hadn't filtered out the lab contamination. Once the data was properly cleaned, the true rate of horizontal gene transfer was revealed to be a totally normal, boring 1 to 2%. Tardigrades absolutely didn't steal their superpowers from alien bacteria. They evolved these incredible survival mechanisms entirely on their own.
Saving the day? Translating tardigrade tech to humans.
That standalone evolutionary brilliance is exactly why scientists are now looking to the tardigrade to save human lives. We are currently translating this microscopic tech into massive real-world medical applications. First up, let's look at medical radioprotection. Remember that DSUP shield we just talked about? Researchers are now using lipid nanoparticles to deliver DSUP mRNA directly into healthy human tissues during cancer radiation therapy. The mRNA temporarily expresses the DSUP protein, perfectly coating and shielding the patient's healthy DNA from the destructive radiation that's meant for the tumor. And because it's mRNA, it's totally transient. It doesn't permanently alter the human genome, but it does prevent the severe, painful tissue damage that usually accompanies cancer treatments. It's a real game changer.
And what about those bioglass CHAS proteins? They are being engineered right now to eliminate the global medical cold chain. Think about it. Right now, life-saving vaccines and biologics must be kept strictly refrigerated, which is hugely expensive and frankly impossible in a lot of remote areas. But by adding tardigrade CHAS proteins to the medicine and freeze-drying it, the proteins form that protective aerogel. The medicine can then be shipped anywhere across the globe, sitting perfectly safely at room temperature for months, and then instantly rehydrated at the point of care with zero loss in effectiveness.
Which leaves us with this final, awe-inspiring thought. If a microscopic water bear, a sluggish, 8-legged creature living in a patch of damp moss, holds the genetic secrets to surviving the hardest radiation, the deepest vacuums, and the deadliest climates, what other biological revolutions are quietly waiting to be discovered right in our own backyards? Thank you so much for exploring the science with us on The Explainer. Keep observing and keep wondering.